what would you add to just a regular person's understanding of what China's real goals are?
Well, the American people need to understand that the Chinese Communist Party, the MSS, their intel agencies and stuff like that are using capital to infiltrate our country. We're a capitalistic country. We're founded on free enterprise and trust and the ability to go out and make your dreams true. And they're feeding into that by using large amounts of capital. So it's important that they hear, because there was all this discussion in 2020 about $10 million for Sinohawk. The $10 million was insignificant. That $10 million was to get office space, although Hunter wanted to take it all out and put it in his piggy bank day one, which was part of the reason why we went back and forth. But Director Zhang and Chairman Yi were talking about deploying billions to potentially tens of billions of U.S. dollars in the United States in infrastructure projects, financial institutions. If your readers aren't familiar, there's a very successful investment bank called Moelis & Company. Ken Moelis, the founder of that business, it's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. I sat down with him at the rooftop of the Peninsula Hotel in 2020 in a very serious discussion talking about buying Moelis & Company, a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Ken Moelis wouldn't have taken the time to sit down with me if he didn't think it was real, right? And we were having those discussions because CEFC was looking at deploying large amounts of money on our own shores.
So scale really important here. The 10 million, that is like a little sprinkle fund. That is not the big
Not even
flow.
a sprinkle. It's like a
drop.
weekend.
A drop. But do this. Orient listeners right now. What is CEFC? Who is Chairman Yi? Who is Director Zhang? And who is Patrick Ho? Give me those four. CEFC, Zhang, Yi, Ho.
Okay. So CFC at its peak was a top 5 private enterprise in mainland China, in the energy business, but also in the financial institution business and a variety of other tech, military stuff that they were doing. But the primary core of it was the energy business around the world. And at its peak, I think it was doing in the 40s, $40+ billion of revenue on an annual basis. Chairman Yi was the chairman of that company, and if you look him up, you'll notice that he's a very stealth individual. People say there's not much known about him. Where did he come from? Where did CFC come from? All of a sudden, they're on the global stage, and you have this Forbes 40 under 40 individual flying around on an Airbus 300, I believe. And when he touched down in a city, he would roll with an entourage like 15, 20 people deep of executives. So Chairman Yi was the executive or the chairman of it, who in March of 2018 disappeared. Hasn't been seen since. People speculate whether he's dead or in a mud hole in mainland China. So that's part of our story later. So that's Chairman Yi. Then you have Director Zhang. There was a debate whether he's the number 2 or number 3. I believe, based on my interaction and knowledge, that he was the senior most Chinese Communist Party member at CEFC. I was told he was sort of put in place to keep an eye on Chairman Yi a couple of different times by people I would trust. And he was the one flying around the world striking deals. There's a famous picture of him with Putin in Budapest, Hungary in August 2017 when they were in the middle of the Rosneft deal. He's the individual I interacted with extensively up until the end of July 2017 when the Bidens stepped in and decided they wanted to, take all the money directly themselves. But Director Zhang, interesting enough, was able to leave the United States, was never named in that trial that we're going to talk about in the SDNY. He's named by witnesses, but he was never charged, and his visas were revoked in the summer of 2017. So he's a high-level executive. He was the, on-the-ground deal guy doing business in, Africa, South America, all over the world. And then Patrick Ho, I never met. I'd actually never heard of Patrick Ho until he was indicted in November of 2017, and this house of cards built by the Chinese Communist Party called CEFC came crumbling down between Patrick Ho's indictment and Chairman Yi disappearing into a mud hole or jail in, call it very early, may have been late February, but early March 2018. So don't know if that covers all of it.
Very helpful context. So CEFC, this is the big Chinese energy business investment conglomerate that is going to plow in the cash, in theory, to Oneida, this business entity, the one where we'd originally contemplated 10% for the big guy.
I didn't,
you've done that extensively on a lot of things. But just for those catching up, we get Oneida set up. CEFC is going to plow the money in. Zhang gets that shakedown text message from Hunter Biden. We'll throw that on the screen saying, I'm sitting here with my father, start making the payments. And then Patrick Ho, someone you haven't met, but we're going to learn about him.
Right.
Ho is one of these executives whose job it is to consummate the bribe, to make the government official compromised and do what's necessary. And he ends up running a foundation that is funded entirely by CEFC.
Correct.
And this is not unusual, by the way. Shell has a foundation that they run. Exxon has a foundation they run. And these foundations largely exist to build goodwill and to achieve the goals of the company. But here with China, based on everything we've been discussing leading up to this point, you have described a China that is trying to get senior government officials, former government officials, upcoming government officials compromised. And so there is this trial that occurs that you just referenced. Right. In New York, where Patrick Ho is accused by the United States government of facilitating these bribes. And I want to read the opening statement in this trial. So again,
Matt, do you mind if I just address one piece of that? Because you just hit a lot. For the American people listening to this, I'd encourage you to look at the WhatsApp messages that Matt just referenced on July 30th, 2017 and July 31st, 2017. But even more important, look at the one on July 25th, 2017. It's a group discussion called Oneida Holdings. It was myself, James Gillier, Rob Walker, Hunter Biden, and Jim Biden. And in that message, Hunter says, I haven't spoken to either of them, meaning he hasn't spoken to Director Zhang or Chairman Yi because he was yielding to me to focus on getting the $10 million of capital into Sinohawk Holdings to capitalize the business. That's July 25th, where he says, I haven't spoken to any of them. Then 5 days later, on July 30th, he invokes his father sitting next to him because he knows he's broke. He has all these payments due for his alimony, a variety of things on the 1st of August. And at that time, remember, I didn't know he was a drug addict or had these issues. I had no idea to the extent of the problems that he was personally dealing with and stuff like that. But on the 30th, he says, why haven't you fulfilled the commitment? That commitment he's talking about is Sinohawk Holdings, okay? Then on the 31st, all of a sudden his tone changes after he's had a discussion with Director Zhang and Zhao, who was the interpreter for Director Zhang, and all of a sudden he's now reshaping it where the commitment to Sinohawk Holding isn't what he's focused on. He's focusing on reshaping the partnership to remove Oneida and put his law firm, Owasco, in as the 50% owner. Why was he able to do that? It plays into your focus, Matt. He was able to do that because all CEFC cared about was the Biden family and the Biden name. I was irrelevant. I was insignificant. I had looked Director Zhang in the face numerous times. The first time I met him, I told him, listen, I believe you're going to lie, cheat, and steal. And he laughed and said, listen, we're very westernized. When we say we're going to do something, we will do it. And I said, well, that's not been my track record in my interaction being in China and all that stuff. And so they knew they had fully executed operating agreements in Sinohawk Holdings, and they knew they had liability to circumvent those agreements. But they were willing to do that at the end of July 2017 because all they wanted was the Biden family and the power and the access to information. And why at that moment in time? Because this is important to the trial you're going to talk about, because it plays into how they acted. They had me chase them for 2 months for this money. We're getting to it. Why all of a sudden did it flow within 10 days? Well, Hunter invokes his father, but more importantly, the Chinese needed something. CEFC was under the impression there were sealed indictments of they didn't know who. They thought possibly Patrick Ho, possibly the chairman, possibly Director Zhang at the end of July 2017. And they needed information and access. And so they were willing to do whatever the Bidens asked them to do. I was insignificant. James Gillier was insignificant. Rob Walker. And that's what happened. And those WhatsApp messages spell it out in intimate detail. And you can cross-check them with a variety of information. And so my hat's off to, Shapley and Ziegler for being bold and proud and fighting for the truth for the American people and coming out and producing that information. So sorry, I just thought that
very helpful. We'll get
very important.
All that on the screen and all that as context, because the fundamental essence of the Biden defense here is that this wasn't a bribe with CEFC. This was legitimate business, and they cast you as just kind of a disgruntled business guy who didn't get the right part of the deal that you wanted, when in reality, you were the one being duped to be brought in to look like this was legitimate business because you're a legitimate businessman. But then around the legitimate business entity, Oneida Holdings, they were getting the payments. And it's so correct the way you describe it. The only reason they were able to go around you, the legitimate businessman, is because this wasn't legitimate business. So if the core tenet of the Biden defense is this is all legitimate business, that's when you made the point at the hearings, people need to know the truth about CEFC and what they're doing. And so
and how come no deal was ever done? How come with Sinohawk there wasn't a deal done? I don't mean the $10 million. I mean an actual transaction where we invested hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. I had a detailed deal where we were going to invest $300 to $500 million in Romania. It didn't happen. The Bidens claim they worked for 2 years to present all these deals. How come none of the deals happened? You're going to get to it because you're going to focus on this trial. And that's the same way they operated in Chad and Uganda because they needed things. So they came with their capital. They claimed they were going to do things. When they got what they needed, they sort of just rode off and moved on to the next thing. And what they needed at the end of July 2017 is they needed intel and details about those sealed indictments of CFC executives and what it meant to their company.
So key on that. And we also want to put up on the screen here the Devin Archer messages with Hunter Biden, where he's saying, well, gee, Hunter, we're telling the Chinese we can protect them from indictments. And here I am, Devin Archer, getting indicted. It sort of limits our ability to be able to sell that protection. Thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel with notifications turned on. You won't want to miss any of the breaking news.